Hey, sleepy friends. Welcome back to another hush story from the pages of forgotten history. Tonight, we drift behind the cloister walls and stone chapel doors of the medieval convent, where daily life for a nun was far more demanding, strict, and sometimes lonely than the saints' tales ever say. Curl up, close your eyes, and let these soft, dusty details hush you to sleep. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? I love seeing who's drifting through the hush night with us. And if these gentle, boring histories calm your mind, don't forget to subscribe to our Sleepy channel for more soothing journeys into the past. Now, breathe deep and imagine yourself stepping into the world of the medieval nun. Imagine waking before dawn, your cell cold and damp, the stone walls leaching the warmth from your bones, even through the coarse linen shift you wear. You open your eyes to the faint flicker of a tallow candle, the tiny flame fighting the drafts that slip under your wooden door dock in this convent. Tucked away behind high walls and a stout iron gate, you and dozens of other women move to a rhythm that has barely changed in centuries. The bell tolls before the sun rises, and you shuffle into the chapel, your bare feet whispering across rush-covered floors. The air inside smells faintly of incense, mingled with the musty scent of old wood and cold stone. Here you kneel for matins, the first of 8 daily offices that carve your day into precise, unwavering hours. Your breath mists in the dim light as you chant psalms in Latin, the words half understood yet memorized through years of repetition. Some sisters drift into brief, guilty sleep during the prayers. The prioress notices, always, and a gentle penance is given later. After matins, you slip back to your cell for an hour of sleep before lauds, then to the refectory for your first meal, usually coarse bread, thin pottage, and perhaps a spoonful of ale or watered wine. Silence is kept during meals, broken only by the quiet drone of a sister reading scripture aloud from a worn wooden lectern. Your chores begin when the sun rises. Higher, you tend the convent's small herb garden, pulling weeds with chilled fingers, or you copy manuscripts in the scriptorium by candlelight. Ink stains your fingertips. The smell of vellum and lamp oil clings to your hair. Sometimes you tend the sick in the infirmary, wiping feverish brows, changing soiled linen, praying for healing that does not always come. Life behind these walls was meant to be a sanctuary, but in truth it could feel more like a prison. Vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience bind you as tightly as the cloister's iron gate. Letters from family are rare. Gossip is discouraged, but it travels nonetheless in whispers during laundry or spinning dot. Yet within these strict routines, some sisters find small rebellions, a secret conversation with a visiting priest, a hidden pastry tucked away during the baking. But punishment for rule breaking is quiet and humiliating. Extra penance, fewer rations, a night spent in vigil on the cold chapel floor. When night falls, you return to your cell, the silence broken only by the distant calls of owls or the wind through the cloister's arches. You lie on your straw pallet, hands folded on your chest, whispering prayers you hope will drown out the longing for a life beyond these walls. And so, the bell tolls again. Tomorrow, it all begins anew. Imagine you've finished your dawn prayers, your knees stiff from kneeling on cold stone. The chapel's hush still clings to your mind like mist, but your day of labor is only just beginning. You follow the other sisters down the narrow passageway, candle flames flickering against damp walls. The convent's kitchen is a smoky, drafty room at the back of the cloister. Picture the long wooden table, its surface worn smooth by generations of chopping, kneading, and silent work. There is no roaring hearth like a noble house, just a low stone fireplace with an iron cauldron, where thin gruel bubbles for the morning meal dot. You wash your hands in icy water from a rain barrel. Then, Join the line of nuns peeling onions and shredding stale bread. Your fingers are red and raw. Your shoulders ache from hauling sacks of turnips and barley. No chatter fills the air here. The rule of silence means you communicate with small gestures. A nod for salt, a glance for the ladle. Sometimes you glimpse Sister Agatha, the oldest among you, bent over the pot, stirring and muttering prayers under her breath. You wonder if you'll still be here when your own hair is white and your back bent double. When the meal is finally ready, you help carry the bowls to the refectory, the stone dining hall where each nun eats in silence, eyes cast down. Bears. No feast on these wooden trenchers. Just the same thin porridge and yesterday's stale bread, washed down with weak ale or watered wine not outside. The world beyond the convent walls grows busy. Villagers heading to the fields, children laughing. In muddy lanes. But inside these walls, the rhythm is as steady and unchanging as the tolling of the bell. Pray, work, eat, pray again. You swallow each spoonful, mindful not to spill, mindful of the vow of poverty that binds you to this simple fare. It is all. The nourishment you will have before another round of prayers and another round of work begins. Asterisk. Imagine you've washed the last bowl from the midday meal, your fingers puckered and chilled from the basin of cloudy water. The bell tolls again, calling you back through the stone cloisters. Your sandals tapping softly on damp flagstones dot your cell. Your sleeping quarters is no larger than a shepherd's stall. The heavy wooden door creaks as you push it open. Inside, a narrow cot rests against the rough plaster wall, covered only by a thin straw mattress and a single coarse wool blanket. No feather pillows, no embroidered linens. Those luxuries belong to noble chambers, not to the daughters of Christ. In winter, a bitter wind creeps through the cracks in the shuttered window. You pull your blanket tight around your shoulders, trying to hold in a little warmth. Sometimes you can see your breath as you whisper your prayers, each word slipping like a ghost into the chill air. Look around the room. There's little to see. A wooden cross above your bed, a shelf with a single candle stub, and a battered book of psalms. Your habit, hung on a peg, still damp from the morning's wash. No portraits, no ornaments, no tokens from the world you left behind. There are nights when the silence feels comforting, like a soft shroud wrapped around your thoughts. Other nights, the hush is deafening, pressing in until you hear only your heartbeat and the creaking timbers above. You may share these halls with dozens of sisters, yet your solitude is complete. You pull the blanket higher, knees tucked to your chest, trying to dream of warmth, of your mother's hearth, of a loaf, of fresh bread pulled straight from the oven. But the bell will ring again soon, matins before dawn, and the rhythm will go on. Cold, sleep, prayer, work, all for the promise of salvation. Asterisk. You wake before the first gray light creeps through the narrow window. The bell for matins tolls, low and hollow, echoing along the stone passageways like a voice from another world. You slip from your hard straw bed, wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders, and step into the corridor. You walk in line with your sisters, a hush of sandaled feet and shivering breath. Words are rare here. Silence is a vow you carry like a stone in your pocket, always present, always heavy. In the scriptorium or the garden, at the wash trough or the chapel door, your tongue stays still, except for whispered prayers. In the medieval convent, silence is meant to quiet sinful thoughts, to tame gossip, envy, longing. But inside your mind, the thoughts run free. You remember your family farm, your mother's gentle singing. You imagine the village beyond the convent wall, the markets and festivals you will never join again. You wonder about the children you never bore. Some sisters struggle with the hush more than others. The young ones, who arrived with hearts still full of the world's chatter and laughter, sometimes slip. A muffled giggle during herb gathering. A hushed question about where Sister Agnes has gone. For these lapses, penance waits, extra prayers. Days spent fasting, no meat to warm the belly. Sometimes you long to hear your own voice ring out, to break the hush with a song from your childhood. But the walls hold your secrets. Even the birds that flutter at the convent garden's edge seem to chirp more softly, as if they too obey the rule of silence. And yet, in that hush, there is a strange comfort. In the stillness, your mind drifts. It floats above the cold stone floors, above the damp garden soil, above the iron bars on the convent gate. The world grows small. The hush grows wide. And you, the quiet keeper of your own vow, breathe in the silence like air, letting it fill. You until the bell tolls again. You might think the convent walls would protect you from harshness, that the world inside is all prayer, peace, and gentle hymns. But even here, there is discipline. There must be. In these stone cloisters, your soul is shaped by obedience, and by the rod when needed. When you break a rule, a word spoken out of turn, a loaf of bread snuck from the kitchen, a drowsy head nodding off during midnight prayers, there is penance. Sometimes it is simple, extra prayers while kneeling, on the cold flagstones until your knees ache. Other times, you are sent to fast on bread and water, your empty stomach rumbling while the others eat their thin stew in the refectory. For greater failings, the punishments become heavier. A sister might be ordered to wear rough sackcloth under, her habit a scratchy fabric rubbing her skin raw, or to lie prostrate before the chapter house while the others step carefully around her. Some are sent to the convent's smallest chamber, a bare, dark cell, no larger than a cupboard, where they wait in silence with only a crucifix for company. It is said, these strict penances protect the soul from greater sin, that they wash away pride, lust, or envy before they take root too deep. But behind the high walls, these acts of correction can break a spirit as surely as they build it. You see it in the older sisters' eyes, the ones who have fasted too often, who flinch at the sound of the abbess's staff tapping the stone floor. And yet, even these punishments become part of the rhythm of convent life. A grim echo of the harshness outside these walls. A reminder that even here, cloaked in God's service, there is no true escape from the pain of the world. Only the promise that, through penance, your soul may find its quiet redemption. Asterisk time? Inside the convent walls does not belong to you. The bells rule it, ringing out across the cloister at every hour, guiding you from one devotion to the next. And when the world outside sleeps, you are often awake, your breath forming pale clouds in the chill of the chapel air. The midnight office, matins, breaks your rest like a blade through cloth. In the silence of the dormitory, the sacristan paces with a small handbell, rousing the sisters from uneasy sleep. You rise, half dreaming, fingers fumbling at your veil, feet slipping into worn leather slippers. In the darkness, the nuns form a single file, candles flickering in each hand. The cloister echoes with the soft shuffle of feet, the faint hiss of wax dripping onto cold stone. Within the chapel, the smell of damp stone and beeswax mingles. You stand in your stall, back straight, eyes straining to stay open, voice thin, but steady as psalms fill the vaulted space. The hours stretch long, your mind drifting in and out of waking. Sometimes you feel as though your soul hovers in that space between sleep and prayer. The murmured Latin, the rustle of habits, the distant hoot of an owl outside the stained glass window. Each verse is a lullaby and a burden all at once. When a final amen sounds, you retreat to your narrow straw mattress. But sleep is shallow and short-lived. Dawn comes quickly. The bells call you back to lauds, then to prime. Each day repeats this cycle. Prayer, work, silence, and still. More prayer. it is in these sleepless vigils that you glimpse the raw edge of devotion. Here, the cost of your chosen life is counted not in coin, but in hours given up, in rest denied, dreams dissolved into whispered hymns that drift heavenward while you stand below, swaying with tired limbs and a faithful, weary heart. Imagine. Now the hush that wraps itself around your days like a coarse woolen cloak. Silence, for the medieval nun, is not simply an absence of noise. It is an act of obedience, a discipline that binds your tongue and shapes your very thoughts. From the time you rise in the pre-dawn dark until the last candle guttered out at Compline, your voice is held captive. Words are rationed like scraps of bread, spoken only when duty demands, or when confession unburdens the soul. The rest of your speech is woven into signs. A finger pressed to the lips for quiet, a tilt of the head for permission, a simple gesture to ask for food or help dot in the cloister walk. Your footfalls echo against cold flagstones, the only sound to accompany your passing. Meals are taken in the refectory in a hush, so deep you can hear the scrape of wooden spoons against pottery bowls, the soft crack of bread torn by calloused fingers. A single voice might break the quiet, a reader, chosen each day, who recites holy texts from a carved pulpit, while the sisters chew their plain porridge, eyes lowered in meditation. Yet inside you, thoughts swirl unspoken. Doubts, fleeting dreams of another life, memories of the outside world, all are locked behind lips stitched shut by the rule. There are days when you crave a single word, a true conversation, a laugh that rings freely down the hallway. But the silence is your penance and your shield. In the quiet, you are meant to hear only the voice of God, echoing where your own voice cannot dot, so you swallow your words like bitter draughts of medicine. You learn to listen to the creak of old wood, the shuffle of habits, the sighs of sisters wrestling with the same unvoiced burdens. In the hush, you belong entirely to the order, your tongue and your thoughts given over to a discipline as rigid as the stone walls that keep the outside world at bay. Now, slip quietly from the stone cloister to the small enclosed garden. Beyond, for the medieval nun, the garden is both refuge and relentless labor. A patch of walled earth, hemmed in by high stones to guard the sisters from wandering eyes, becomes your daily domain. Beneath your linen coif, your brow dampens as you bend to the soil. You feel the tug of the old earth beneath your fingernails, the rough cut of spade and hoe against the beds. Herbs for healing, onions for the kitchen, hardy greens to stretch the meager larder through lean seasons. All must be coaxed from stubborn ground with patient hands. In summer, the garden hums, with bees around lavender and sage, but the sun beats your shoulders as penance. In winter, you trudge through muddy paths to cover frost-brittle shoots with straw, your breath a pale ghost in the icy dawn. There is no gardener to ease this work. You are both laborer and caretaker. Yet here, the garden is more than toil. It is a patch of the world that feels almost yours, a reminder that life can root and blossom even behind cloistered walls. Some nuns take solace among the green beds, whispering prayers to Saint Fiacre for good harvests. Others press fragrant sprigs of rosemary between the pages of their prayer books, the sharp scent a reminder that beauty survives even here. Still, every thorn that pricks your skin is a lesson, in humility, in hardship, in the tiny mercies that bloom despite it all. The garden reminds you that outside these walls, fields stretch for miles, but your plot is a cage as much as a sanctuary. You pull weeds and tend buds, knowing that this is the limit of your freedom, contained within. Stones older than your longest prayers. Picture yourself now crossing the damp cloister walk, your sandals tapping softly on worn flagstones. It's time for the evening meal, the simple fare that sustains your body while your mind stays tethered to prayer. You step into the refectory, a long, narrow hall of stone, its high-beamed ceiling echoing the clink of pottery bowls and the faint rustle of woolen habits. A faint draft creeps along the floor. In winter, your hands tremble around your wooden spoon. Knuckles red with cold. Silence reigns here. No chatter fills the air to distract you from the taste of your watery pottage or coarse bread. Instead, one sister stands at a raised lectern, reading aloud from Scripture. Her voice is steady, but the words blur into a hum, the cadence as much. A ritual as the meal itself. You are meant to feed your spirit as you swallow each spoonful, to meditate on your sins and small graces with every bite. You glance down the row. Tired faces, lowered eyes, the small signs of hunger born with obedience. Sometimes the meal is little more than boiled cabbage and thin ale. On feast days, perhaps a bit of fish or cheese brightens the table, but indulgence is rare. Gluttony, after all, is a sin that lurks even in these austere halls. As dusk gathers. Beyond the narrow windows, the flicker of tallow candles casts long shadows on the whitewashed walls. You imagine how the world outside feasts and sings in warm halls while you sip your broth in shivering quiet. But this, too, is your vow, to accept what is given without complaint, to find humility even in your hunger. When the reading ends, so does the meal. Bowls are stacked, scraps gathered for the poor. You rise from the bench, your stomach not quite full, but your spirit reminded that the body's discomfort is another stone on the path to heaven. Now, drift with me through the stone corridors after supper has faded, and the refectory's candles have guttered low. You stand at the edge of the convent's enclosed burial ground, a small plot of holy earth where your departed sisters rest beneath simple stone markers. It's your turn for night watch. Once or twice each month, each nun takes her place in this hush vigil to pray for the souls of the departed and the salvation of the living. A small wooden lantern swings from your hand, its dim flame flickering in the restless wind. The graveyard is not large, but in the dark it feels endless. Rows of weathered crosses, patches of rough grass, and the hush of trees overhead. Somewhere an owl hoots. The chill creeps into your habit, worming through wool to bite at your skin. There is no comfort but the rhythm of your whispered prayers. You kneel on damp earth beside Sister Anna's grave, tracing your beads. She died last winter, coughing, up her final breath in the convent's cold infirmary. You whisper the Pater Noster, the Ave Maria, again and again, your breath misting in the moonlight. Each bead slips through your fingers, a reminder that time here is marked not by bells, but by the endless turning of prayers. Your eyelids droop. It would be so easy to lean against the mossy stone and drift away, but that is not your purpose. You are a guardian tonight, not of riches, but of memories, of the sacred promise that these souls are never forgotten, that each humble grave is tended by hands still warm with life. Far off, the convent bell gives a hollow note. Your watch is over. You rise stiffly, brush dirt from your knees, and pass the lantern to the next sister waiting at the cloister gate, her eyes sleepy, her fingers pale and cold. In this small act of vigil, you are bound to the cycle of life and death, a quiet keeper of the hush between worlds. Asterisk, let your mind drift now into the hush of the convent's scriptorium, the quiet chamber where vellum rustles and the smell of ink clings to your fingers. It is here that the sisters copy sacred texts, craft careful illuminations, and sometimes keep secrets they ought not to write. You are Sister Margaret now, hunched over your small wooden desk beneath an arched window. Rain taps softly at the leaded panes. By candlelight, you scratch a letter in Latin, your quill gliding over parchment. But this is not a psalm, nor a letter to the bishop. It is for your brother, a knight in service to a distant lord. He begs for news from home, news you're forbidden to send without the abbess's leave. Your stomach knots as you write. Disobedience can mean harsh penance, or worse, public shame before your sisters. But you remember your mother's voice and the warmth of your brother's laugh so long ago. The words pour out, line by line, a scrap of worldly love hidden inside cloistered walls. Outside the scriptorium, footsteps echo on stone. You blow the ink dry, slide the parchment into your sleeve. Sister Joan, the prioress, appears in the doorway, eyes narrowed. Her voice is calm, but firm as she questions your work. You point to the open psalter, pretending diligence. Inside your habit, the forbidden letter crackles against your ribs, its words burning hotter than the candle flame. You know you must find a trusted lay servant, perhaps the stable boy who carries the convent's grain to market. Only then might your words reach the world beyond these walls. If caught, your penance will be bitter. Cold nights on bare stone, endless days fasting and praying for forgiveness. Yet tonight, you tuck the letter inside a stitched hem, your pulse quickening at this tiny rebellion. Even in this world of endless rules and silence, the human heart finds ways to speak. Asterisks sink, deeper now into the stone corridors of the convent. The scriptorium fades behind you, and you find yourself following the sound of echoing footsteps down a narrow passageway. Lantern light flickers on cold gray walls as you pass wooden doors banded with iron. You are no longer Sister Margaret, but another young novice, Sister Alice, kneeling on the rough flagstone of the penance cell. This tiny chamber is your world for the next 7 days. Your sin? A careless word, spoken out of turn during evening prayers. Or perhaps a moment of laughter, too loud in the cloister garden. A reminder that even the smallest crack in the wall of silence must be sealed with sacrifice. In this stone cell, you sleep on straw that rustles when you turn. A single slit window high in the wall lets in a ribbon of gray dawn. There is no bed, no fire. Just you, your rosary, and a single candle stub that gutters each night before you finish your whispered prayers. Listen to the silence. Sometimes it's so deep you hear the blood in your ears. You count your beads. You mumble your Ave Marias. You dream of warm bread in the refectory and your sisters' quiet voices beyond the door. But here you remain. The penance must cleanse you. Peel back your pride until humility is all that's left. The days blur together. Bread and water passed through a small hatch. A visiting confessor's muffled blessing through the wooden grate. Your knees bruise from hours of kneeling. The straw beneath you grows damp and matted. Yet in the hush, you learn the convent's lesson. That solitude, like stone, can both protect and imprison. When the door finally creaks open, the abbess regards you with cool eyes. She says nothing, only gestures for you to stand. Your legs shake, your back aches, but you bow your head and slip back into the rhythm of convent life. Chastened, quieter, a bit more hidden inside your veil. Asterisk steps softly now through the cloister. Walk, the arches framing a courtyard garden damp with early morning mist. You are Sister Beatrice this time, fingertips brushing the cold stone as you keep your eyes lowered, your mind in prayer, or so it seems. In truth, tucked deep within the sleeve of your habit lies a secret. A folded scrap of parchment, pressed, flat and smudged with anxious fingerprints. Its ink is hurried, its words forbidden. A letter from the world beyond these walls. Perhaps it's from a brother or a father who wants you to petition the abbess for family matters. Or maybe it's from someone you knew before the veil, a young man whose memory still flickers when you can't sleep at night. Whatever the truth, to hold this letter is a mortal sin against your vows. To read it is to break the sacred silence of the cloister. You slip behind a column, breath shallow, heartbeat loud in the hush. Your eyes dart to the garden. Is that a shadow moving behind the apple tree? No, only Sister Agnes gathering herbs. The paper rustles like dry leaves as you open it. Lines of longing, or of family duty, words that pull you back toward the world you left behind. A footstep echoes on the flagstones. Panic tightens your chest. If the prioress finds you now, there will be penance, humiliation, perhaps expulsion. Or worse, a lifetime of surveillance within these walls. You crumple the parchment, pressing it to your lips for one last stolen taste of another life. Then you slip it beneath a loose stone behind the cloister bench, heart hammering. You breathe. In the scent of rosemary and damp earth, whisper a quick prayer for forgiveness, and rejoin your sisters in the garden, face blank, vows intact, the secret hidden in the shadows. Picture yourself now at the end of a long stone hallway. The air is chill, heavy with the scent of old wood polish and beeswax candles. You are Sister Juliana this time, knees pressed into the straw mat of the Abbey's small confessional, your fingers twisted around the hem of your habit dot in the hush. You can hear the priest breathing on the other side of the wooden screen. You sense his presence more than you see him. A dark outline behind the carved lattice, a voice that echoes your secret sins back to you. Once. These weekly confessions were a comfort, a balm for the soul, a place to lay down your failings and emerge lighter. But as the years pass, your burdens tangle like brambles. Thoughts that drift during prayers, the fleeting envy of another sister's delicate embroidery, the slow-burning memory of the world you left behind. Sometimes you wonder what the priest thinks as you whisper the same failings week after week. Does he judge you? Does he scrawl your weaknesses in the Abbey's secret ledger? You feel your face flush at the thought. You bite your lip until you taste copper. Tonight, you speak softly, your voice barely rising above the rustle of your veil. You confess your disobedience, your resentment, your hidden doubts that perhaps God does not see you in this cloister, or worse, that he does, but he does not care. The priest murmurs your penance through the screen. More prayers, extra. Chores in the scriptorium, fasting until next dawn. You bow your head and whisper your amen. The latch clicks open, and you step out of the darkness into the corridor's flickering candlelight. Behind you, the confessional stands silent and waiting, like a mouth that will never close. Now drift with me to a small patch of earth behind. The cloister wall, the nun's cemetery. The air here carries a hush that clings to the hem of your habit, colder than the stone corridors you've left behind. You are Sister Agnes tonight, lantern in hand, breath misting before your lips. Another sister has passed. Old age, the wasting sickness. No one says for certain. In the convent, death is a familiar visitor, no matter how fervent the prayers. How many vigil candles flicker before the Virgin's image? Tonight, you keep vigil while the gravedigger works. His spade slices into the frozen soil, each dull thud echoing through the silent walled garden. The simple wooden coffin rests on a makeshift bier, a rough plank on 2 bricks. You glance at the shape beneath the white burial shroud, remembering the way Sister Catherine's hands stitched altar cloths with the finest needlework you'd ever seen. Asterisk. In the distance, the chapel bell tolls softly, marking another hour before dawn. You shift from foot to foot to keep warm, woolen cloak pulled tight around your shoulders. The smell of churned earth mixes with the tongue of distant smoke. Someone's hearth fire beyond the abbey wall. For a moment, you wonder who will stand here when it is your turn to rest beneath the soil. Will they whisper prayers for your soul? Will your name be remembered, scratched into the convent's ledger, and spoken aloud at feast days? When the pit is ready, the gravedigger wipes his brow, his breath a ghostly cloud. You kneel in the dirt, murmur a final prayer, and mark the cross over your heart. A cold wind sighs through the orchard trees that guard this little corner of consecrated earth, and you feel, perhaps, that the world beyond the cloister sleeps easier than you do tonight. Asterisk. before the sun lifts its pale face over the convent. Roof, you must rise. Imagine it now, the sharp chill that seeps into your bones as you leave your straw pallet. You slip bare feet into rough woolen socks, fumbling with your habit's belt cord in the darkness. The small dormitory is silent save for the rustle of wimples and the muffled coughs of sisters who do not sleep well. You gather in the cloister walk, lanterns bobbing like fireflies in a sea of stone. The church door groans as it opens, ancient, hinges straining as though they too resent the hour. Inside the choir stalls, you kneel on the hard oak bench. The miserere psalm begins, a chant so old its syllables feel as if they've always belonged to the air itself. Your breath ghosts before. Your lips. Each sister's voice weaves into the next, high, wavering, soft. Somewhere, a draught slips through the cracked stone, making candles flicker dot in winter. The chill feels merciless. Your fingers stiffen, your lips tremble, yet the psalm must go on, a river of prayer washing over the frost-bitten dawn. You close, your eyes to keep them from watering, each syllable a small surrender to the rhythm of the divine office dot. When the chant finally fades, you feel the silence like a blanket over your shoulders. For a moment, there is nothing but the creak of the wood, the flutter of robes, and your heartbeat, calm and slow in the hush. Tomorrow, you will rise and do it again. And the day after that, because that is the shape of a nun's life, steady, bitter cold, and softened only by faith and the company of voices in the dark. Asterisk now drift from the cold choir to another corner of your convent life, the shadowed kitchen where the sisters prepare simple meals. Imagine the crackle of a small hearth that never seems to warm the stone walls enough. The smell of broth clings to the air, forever a little sour with stale herbs and old onions. You wake before the rest some days, assigned to stir the pottage. A thin mixture of barley, wilted greens, and yesterday's scraps. Your fingers fumble to lift the iron cauldron's lid. The steam rises, warm against your chilled cheeks, yet never quite enough to chase the ache from your bones. The kitchen is drafty, a single narrow window letting in pale daylight when the sun finally lifts. The floor is packed earth, dusted with straw to keep your worn shoes from slipping. You reach for bunches of dried herbs that hang from the beams overhead, their leaves crisp and brittle, releasing a musty scent as you crumble them into the bubbling pot. You do not cook for comfort. Food is plain, bland, portioned by rule and virtue. You taste the pottage on a wooden spoon. It is watery, but filling enough to line the stomach before prayer. The fire pops, shooting a spark toward your sleeve. You flinch and settle back. Into your task, shoulders hunched, breath visible in the dawn-cold air. Nearby, another sister needs bread. Her knuckles are red, raw from the chill and the coarse flour. She hums under her breath, a soft thread of melody that echoes off the stone walls. This is your shared rhythm, chopping, stirring, washing, praying. Work, prayer, work again. When the bell tolls for the next office, you rinse your hands in a chipped basin. The water is icy, numbing your fingertips to the bone. You dry them. On your apron, pull your wimple tight and file back to the chapel, leaving behind the smell of broth and burnt wood, one small comfort traded for another silent hour on your knees. Asterisk. Now let yourself pass through the drafty corridors to another duty you might bear in this cloistered life, tending the sick. Imagine the convent's small infirmary tucked away behind thick wooden doors, away from the main dormitory. Here, the smell of damp straw mixes with pungent herbal poultices and the acrid bite of vinegar, used to wash wounds and cleanse the air. You tie your apron tighter as you step inside. The room is dim, lit only by narrow slits of daylight and the flicker of a single beeswax candle set near a patient's cot. On straw mattresses, frail bodies shift and cough under thin blankets. Your breath echoes softly as you murmur quiet prayers over each figure. Your hands are clumsy but careful. You grind dried rosemary and thyme in a small mortar, mixing the crumbling leaves with warm animal fat to make a salve. The smell is strong, not pleasant, but better than the raw, untreated sores beneath the bandages. You lift a cloth from a sister's fevered brow, her skin flushed and damp. You whisper the Lord's Prayer while your fingers work, though your mind drifts elsewhere. In the corner sits a bucket of cloudy water and a chipped wooden ladle. You know you must fetch fresh water before Compline. The well outside is nearly frozen, the icy rope rough on your palms as you pull up each heavy pail. When the illness spreads through the convent, a cough that turns to wheezing, or a fever that won't break, you become both caretaker and silent witness to suffering. Sometimes you help prepare the body when the prayers fail. You sprinkle lavender sprigs on the shroud to mask what must be hidden. You light another candle. You pray harder, but there are moments of quiet triumph too, when a sister opens her eyes after days of delirium, when a small bowl of warm broth brings color back to her cheeks. You give thanks, though you know that next week, next season, another ailment will find its way through these old stone walls. You tuck your hands under your sleeves, feeling the rough edges of your cracked knuckles. Even in this hush of care, you are never idle, tending wounds, wiping brows, offering what mercy you can before the next bell calls you back to prayer. Slip your sandals back on and step into the crisp morning air. Your breath rises in pale clouds as you make your way toward the convent's humble garden. This patch of earth is your lifeline, your remedy chest, and your silent teacher of patience. In winter, it is a place of quiet struggle. Imagine you standing at the edge of frozen rows of herbs and hardy vegetables. The soil is stiff, clinging to its secrets beneath a thin crust of frost. You kneel in the brittle straw mulch, your fingers red and raw as they search for the last edible roots hidden in the dirt. You mutter soft prayers for each stubborn parsnip, each pale cabbage leaf you can coax free. You know the garden by heart, where the mint pushes through in spring, where the sage prefers the shelter of the old stone wall. You remember the warmth of summer's abundance when the bees hummed through the lavender and the air was sweet with marjoram. Now, in winter, the garden is silent, except for the distant cry of a lone crow perched on the convent roof. Baskets woven from willow branches rest at your side, half filled with wilted greens and a handful of shriveled carrots. You cover the tender roots with burlap sacks, hoping they will last through the bitterest weeks. The sister infirmarian will need them for broth when fevers come. When coughs rattle through the dormitory again, your back aches as you stand. You brush cold earth from your skirts, the damp seeping through the wool. Before you return inside, you pause to scatter a handful of seeds for the sparrows, a small mercy shared with tiny beating hearts that survive alongside you in this cloistered world. In the garden's hush, you find a different kind of prayer, not words whispered over beads, but the slow promise that life can return if tended gently enough, even when the ground feels hard as stone. After the garden's chill, you pass back through the cloister walkways and feel the weight of the stone walls swallow up the sunlight. You are summoned to the scriptorium, a cold, echoing room where the hours are measured not by bells, but by the scratch of quills and the flicker of oil lamps. Imagine yourself there now, bent over a heavy oak desk, your eyes straining as you copy line after line of sacred text onto creamy vellum pages. The ink smells sharp, a mixture of iron gall and vinegar that stains your fingertips black. You must keep your hands steady, for every blot, every smudge, is a small failure that might ruin an entire page. Your sisters sit beside you, each wrapped in layers of wool and linen to guard against the chill that seeps through the stone. You hear the soft shuffle of sandals as the prioress walks the rows, inspecting the careful work. Now and then, a cough or a stifled sneeze breaks the silence. But no one speaks. The hours creep by. Your back curls, your neck stiffens, your eyes blur with the tiny letters that must be perfectly formed. Each stroke an act of devotion, each gilded initial, a prayer caught in gold leaf. When your mind drifts, you force it back to the page. You wonder who will read these words one day, if they will feel the ghost of your breath on the parchment, the heat of your candle that burned late into the night. Outside the scriptorium windows, snow drifts past the lidded, glass muffling the world. In here, your world is the endless page, a labor of ink, a discipline of silence, a testament that even the quietest hands can carry the word of God across generations. When the final bell tolls for supper, your fingers are cramped and your shoulders ache, but the page is complete. Another fragile leaf to bind into a book that might outlive your name. Asterisk. Now the hush of the scriptorium gives way to another silence. The confessor's chamber. Imagine yourself waiting outside the heavy wooden door, fingers clasped in your sleeves, heartbeat loud in your ears. Behind that door waits the priest, a keeper of your spiritual ledger, the one who holds your secrets close, or so you hope. Inside, the chamber smells of damp stone, stale rushes underfoot, and the faint resin of incense burned last Mass. The confessor sits on a plain stool, head bowed in black robes, and gestures for you to kneel. You confess the smallest trespasses, an uncharitable thought toward Sister Agnes, the sleepy half-sung psalm at matins, the bit of bread you kept for yourself when you were meant to fast. But under the surface, deeper things churn. Perhaps your mind drifts to memories you cannot name, or old guilt that clings like candle wax under your nails. In the darkness of the confessional, you are reminded that your thoughts are never entirely your own. They belong to God, and thus they belong to the Church. The priest listens, sometimes nods, sometimes scolds, always records your penance. Your penance may be small, extra prayers on cold stone, or time spent barefoot in the cloister garden before gone. Or it may be harsh, a meal skipped, the next vigil taken alone in the chapel, whispering psalms while others sleep. When you rise, your knees ache, but your soul is, they say, a little cleaner, ready to face the silence once more. Outside the door, your sisters sit waiting their turn. One clutches a rosary so hard, the beads have left dents in her palm. In this hidden world behind convent walls, secrets are seeds. They grow in the dark, tended by whispers and the confessor's shadow. Asterisk, take a moment to imagine the cold stone floors beneath your bare feet. You rise before dawn, stomach already hollow, because today, like so many days, is a day of fasting. But this is not the gentle abstinence you might know now. In your medieval convent, fasting is a constant companion. Lent comes not once, but lingers and echoes all year. Ember days, rogation days, vigils, saints' eves, all these call for bread to be broken, but never enough to satisfy. Picture yourself seated on a long wooden bench in the refectory. The light is thin, filtering through narrow, unglazed windows. A flickering candle set in a tin holder for every 4 sisters. You sit in silence, eyes downcast, while the prioress reads aloud from Scripture. A bowl of thin pottage is set before you. Barley, maybe, or cabbage boiled until it surrenders all taste. The bread is coarse, dark, and dry. There is no butter, no honey, no indulgence. On stricter days, not even fish or cheese is allowed. Only plain pulses or roots from the convent garden dot the hunger hums in your veins. You feel it in the slow ache behind your ribs, the hollow flutter that makes your head swim when you stand too quickly. Some sisters faint in chapel during long vigils, their bodies too light to hold them upright. Some try to sneak an extra crust, a stolen sip of sweet milk, but they confess their transgressions soon enough, for guilt grows quickly in these cloistered walls. And yet, you accept it. Hunger is part of devotion, part of training the flesh to obey the spirit. You dream of feasts you will never taste again. Roasted meats, dripping with fat, sweet pies with fruits you've only seen once a year. But you swallow your longing with your dry bread, believing this small suffering may lighten your soul when the final judgment comes. Asterisk, take another breath, letting the rhythm of monastic life settle in your bones. Beyond the daily prayers, the masses, and the endless hours in the cold stone chapel, your hands are never idle. To be a nun in the Middle Ages is to serve not only God, but the endless needs of the convent itself. Picture dawn's chill mist, rising off the garden beds as you stoop to pull weeds from the herb patch. Your fingers are raw from digging in the damp soil, and your skirts brush the cabbages and sage. The convent must feed itself. What the orchard doesn't yield must be bartered or begged from neighboring manors. You carry baskets of linen down to the wash house, where icy water splashes against your skirts. Lye soap burns your cracked knuckles as you scrub rough wool habits against wooden boards. You share the labor with other sisters, yet the pile never seems to shrink. Inside the convent, chores multiply like shadows. There are rushes to scatter on the floor to keep damp at bay, beeswax to melt for candles, herbs to dry for simple medicines. Some nuns mend books in the scriptorium, laboring over parchment pages, repairing torn edges with fine stitches. Others sew altar cloths or spin wool, the spindle humming like a bee in the still hair dot. It is unending, this cycle of quiet toil that shapes your days as much as the prayers and chants do. Sometimes you dream of sleeping late or sitting idly in the garden, but such luxuries are for another life, not this cloistered one. Your hands smell of soap and lavender, ink and smoke. They tell the story of a life given to work as much as worship. And when you kneel again at Compline, you feel the ache in your shoulders like another form of penance, proof that every moment, every chore, brings you closer to the paradise you hope to find beyond these walls. Asterisk, close your eyes for a moment and imagine the echo of your own footsteps in the cold cloister hall. Within these stone walls, your voice is not your own. To be a nun is to guard the tongue as closely as the soul. Most convents of the Middle Ages enforced a strict rule of silence, or near silence, meant to protect the sisters from idle gossip and the temptation of worldly speech. Imagine rising in the gray hush of dawn, your lips forming only the prayers you must chant together, each syllable drifting up like breath against the vaulted ceiling. Outside of prayer, you must keep to hushed exchanges or none at all. Simple signs are agreed upon for the necessary tasks of the day. You point at the pitcher when you need water, press a finger to your lips when someone forgets. A slight nod, a raised brow, these become your daily language, breaking silence. Without cause is a sin to be confessed, a mark against your devotion. Even the smallest slip, a joke, an idle tale, feels like a stone dropping into still water. For some sisters, this vow is a relief. It spares them the harshness of words once spoken to them in the outside world. But for others, it is a lonely penance. Some struggle with the pressure that their thoughts are theirs alone to carry. With no chatter to ease the burden. In the dormitory at night, you lie side by side with dozens of other women, but the room is as quiet as a crypt. The only sounds are the rustle of straw pallets, the soft creak of the beams overhead, and the distant bark of a dog beyond the convent wall. Yet silence is not truly empty. Within it, your mind hums with scripture and psalms, the rhythm of chores, the worries that slip in like drafts through the stone walls. Sometimes the silence grows so vast that you feel you might vanish into it, just one more shadow in the endless prayer of the cloister. Asterisk. Now picture yourself hunched over a rough wooden desk, a single flickering candle throwing shadows across. Your parchment. For many nuns, the days and nights were spent as scribes, copying sacred texts by hand in the dim, drafty scriptorium. The work is painstaking. Each letter must be shaped with precision, your quill trimmed just right, the ink mixed from oak gall and iron salts. One slip could mean pages ruined, or worse, accusations of carelessness toward the Word of God. Hours pass unnoticed as you scratch line after line onto vellum. The cold seeps into your hands and shoulders, yet you dare not draw closer to the candle, lest the flame blacken the page or catch your habit's sleeve. Some sisters lose their eyesight early, squinting in the half-light, their fingers stained black and brown from ink. But in this labor, there is also a strange hush of purpose. The pages you copy might outlive you by centuries, passed on to other convents or local churches. In an age when few could read, your hidden work shapes which words will be heard at Mass, what prayers will be whispered by the faithful long after you lie in the convent graveyard. Yet the task is not always inspiring. Fatigue dulls your focus. The smell of animal parchment, the oily ink, and the musty rushes covering the scriptorium floor mingle with the ache in your lower back. Now and then, you dream of sunlight and fields outside these walls, but your gaze returns to the page. Another line, another chapter, another lifetime measured in ink. Asterisk. Settle your thoughts now on the convent's cold, echoing refectory, the place where each day's mealtime was both a ritual and a test of endurance. Imagine sitting shoulder to shoulder on hard benches, your simple wooden bowl before you, steam rising if you were lucky enough to have warm pottage that day. The daily fare for a medieval nun was rarely satisfying. Most convents grew their own vegetables, cabbage, leeks, turnips, onions, but meat was reserved for the sick or elderly, and only permitted on certain feast days. Even fish might be a luxury, depending on your convent's wealth or its distance from rivers or the sea. The strict rules of fasting and abstinence meant that on many days of the week, you might eat only once or rely on bread dipped in thin broth. Hunger was seen as cleansing, a daily offering of discomfort to God, and so you sat, spoon scraping the bottom of your bowl, listening to one of your sisters read aloud from Scripture while you chewed every mouthful slowly. The food was simple, repetitive, and often under-seasoned. Salt was precious. Spices, if they existed at all, were reserved for the wealthiest orders. The bread might be coarse, still gritty, with bits of husk that ground between your teeth. If the stores ran low, moldy or insect-infested loaves were soaked in broth to soften them enough to swallow. The chill of the stone walls made the hunger bite deeper. In winter, your breath misted above your bowl. The rhythm of this daily meal reminded you of your vows, that you had turned away from bodily pleasure, even the simple joy of a hearty meal. Each bite was a reminder that your soul's nourishment was supposed to matter far more than the growl in your belly. Asterisk now. Drift into the hush of the convent's long corridors and cloisters, places where silence was not just preferred, but strictly enforced. Imagine your days wrapped in a thick blanket of quiet, broken only by the chant of prayers or the tolling of the bell. Most medieval convents followed the rule of Saint Benedict or similar codes that dictated when a nun could speak, and when her voice must be stilled. At meals, in dormitories, and during labor in shared spaces, silence was expected. A careless word, a burst of laughter, even a whispered thoughtless comment could earn you penance. Instead of speaking, you learned the intricate system of sign language the sisters used to communicate. Point to your mouth, your bowl, your cup, gestures that stood for hunger, thirst, or need. Over time, this silent language became second nature, yet it never carried the warmth of real conversation. the comfort of casual chatter, the silly stories you might have shared in another life. When a sister broke the silence rule, she might be ordered to kneel in the refectory during meals while the others ate, or given extra prayers to say alone by candlelight. Silence was not only discipline, but also a reminder of obedience, a daily practice of restraining your tongue and your desires alike got in this world. Your own voice became foreign to you. Many older nuns spoke so seldom that when they did, their words emerged thin and reedy, like an echo. The walls of the convent, thick stone and wood, drank up what little sound was offered. Some found peace in the hush. Others felt it gnawed at the edges of their mind, a quiet that was both holy and oppressive. Now, drift further into the cloistered hush, where the silence could be broken only by whispers behind the wooden screen of the confessional. Imagine kneeling on cold stone, your knees pressing into the rush mat as you waited to pour out your private failings, or, for some nuns, to hear the confessions of others. While only priests could formally absolve sins, many senior nuns, especially in influential convents, found themselves listening to the troubles and confessions of the younger sisters. Gossip, resentment, envy, forbidden thoughts. The human mind was a restless place, even behind high walls. Imagine yourself a prioress, heavy veil framing your lined face, as a trembling novice confides in you about a night spent dwelling on worldly memories, a feast once eaten, a lover's kiss half remembered, a tune she should not hum. She weeps in your lap as you hold your hands gently on her shoulders, offering no judgment, only patient counsel and extra prayers. But each confession seeps into your own mind like a slow drip of ink on parchment. In some convents, nuns were expected to report on each other's failings. A word to the prioress if someone stole a morsel of cheese or lingered too long at the gate, speaking to a messenger. This network of surveillance kept the rule intact, but also bred mistrust. Your secret thoughts were never wholly your own, and neither were the secrets you carried for others. Each whispered confession became part of the convent's quiet heartbeat. The walls themselves seemed to know every hidden shame. Over the years, the burden of other people's sins could weigh heavily, pressing down like a second habit on your shoulders. Close your eyes and drift into the quiet corridors of the convent infirmary, a place that tested both faith and endurance. While the world outside braced against plague, pox, and fevers, the cloister's high walls could not always keep illness at bay. Imagine you are Sister Agnes, the infirmarian. The chill of dawn creeps through the flagstone floors as you prepare. Your simple remedies, dried herbs crushed in a mortar, beeswax salves, poultices of rosemary, sage, and thyme. Your sisters lie in neat rows of pallets, pale, shivering forms beneath woolen blankets, lips murmuring prayers through cracked breath. The convent doctor, if there was one at all, was a local monk or a hired physician who might visit once a week, sometimes less. Mostly, care fell to the nuns themselves, washing sores with vinegar, applying leeches for bloodletting, and brewing bitter infusions to fight the invisible humors believed to cause sickness. Now, imagine the dread of contagion. The ringing of the convent bell marked not just the canonical hours, but the slow march of a fevered sister's life toward death. Plague outbreaks struck convents as they did villages and towns, and while the rule called for obedience and charity, the fear of infection was real. Some nuns refused to abandon the sickbed. Others struggled, torn between duty and terror. The rhythm of chanting prayers mingled with the low moans of the dying, and the smell of rosemary hung thick in the air to mask the stench and ward off evil spirits. And when a sister died, there was the grim work of washing the body, wrapping it in a coarse shroud, and digging a small grave within the convent grounds. Even death was communal here. The earth, the prayers, the morning chants, all part of the same cycle, repeated in hushed tones year after year. Asterisk, take a slow breath as you drift deeper into this hidden corner of the convent, where hushed whispers stirred suspicions that even the holiest walls could not silence. Picture yourself as Sister Beatrice, a young novice, kneeling in the dim candlelight of the scriptorium. You've heard the murmurs. An older sister has been accused of practicing charms that look too much like witchcraft. In medieval Europe, the line between pious healing and forbidden magic was thin, dangerously thin. Some nuns learned herbs, astrology, and simple folk cures passed down from wise women in their families. A poultice to ease pain, a charm to soothe the restless child, a whispered prayer mixed with local superstitions. These could be tolerated. But a woman's power, when misunderstood, easily turned to suspicion. Imagine how quickly trust withered behind stone walls. A missing book of prayers, a candle that flickered strangely, a sudden illness blamed on an envious glance. These fed fears. Sisters gathered in the chapter house to murmur about who might be consorting with spirits. The abbess, weary of scandal, might summon the local bishop. If an accusation stuck, the accused nun faced harsh penance, isolation in a cell, or worse, expulsion from the convent's protection. Outside those walls, a branded witch found no mercy, vulnerable to the jeering of villagers, sometimes trial by ordeal, sometimes the stake. To live as a nun was to walk a narrow path. Faith and knowledge must never look too much like power. So you keep your head down, your prayers steady, your thoughts hidden behind downcast eyes. You listen as the wind howls through the cloister, carrying stories of fear and betrayal that echo far beyond the convent walls. Asterisk, close your eyes and settle into the quiet rhythm of thread passing through calloused fingers. You are Sister Joan, one of many who spend day after day in the convent's weaving room. The hum of the spinning wheel becomes the pulse of your life, steady, monotonous, yet so crucial to the abbey's survival. In many medieval convents, textile work was not merely a task, but an economic necessity. The sisters spun raw wool into fine thread, wove sturdy cloth for habits and altar cloths, and embroidered elaborate vestments for wealthy patrons. The more skilled the needlework, the more income the abbey could rely on for repairs, food, or precious books. Asterisk, but the labor was relentless. The room was often cold, the stone floors icy against your feet, even through your woolen shoes. The air grew heavy with the dust of raw fleece, the oil from the wool clinging to your fingertips. Your back ached from the constant bending. Your eyes strained under the dim glow of rushlights as dusk fell. Imagine the hush, broken only by the creak of the loom, the occasional cough, the quiet prayers murmured under breath to keep boredom and drowsiness at bay. Even conversation was restrained, for silence was the rule, and idle chatter was frowned. Upon yet within this silence, small rebellions bloomed, a whispered joke, a secret stitch of color hidden in the hem, a quiet sigh that reminded each sister that her thoughts, at least, were still her own. In these mundane hours, life spun itself into something enduring, a tapestry of labor, devotion, and the constant tension between duty and the longing for freedom beyond the cloister walls. Imagine the hush of the confessional, but not the kind you might picture in a grand cathedral, heavy with incense and shadowed stone. Here, in the convent, confession was woven into daily life, a constant reminder that your thoughts were never entirely your own. You sit on a simple wooden bench in the cloister walk, cold stone beneath you. The priest, appointed by the bishop, visits only on certain days. He is not a gentle fatherly figure, but a stern keeper of spiritual order, asking about your stray thoughts, your moments of envy, your petty frustrations with your sisters. Every slip of the tongue, every sigh of discontent is laid bare. For a medieval nun, confession was more than seeking forgiveness. It was a tool of control. The church saw the cloister as a bastion of purity, and its inhabitants had to be kept untainted by sin. But human thoughts do not always obey. In the privacy of your mind, doubts flicker. Why must your daily life be so hard? Why does the abbess favor some and scold others? Why do your prayers feel unanswered when your heart aches for warmth or the touch of a family long left behind? And so you confess these, turning your inner life into a ledger of failings. The confessor listens, sometimes rebukes, sometimes absolves, but always reminds you that your soul is not entirely yours. Even your dreams can betray you, for sinful thoughts in sleep might find their way to your tongue when you kneel at the confessional gate. Still, within these whispered exchanges, some sisters find a hidden mercy, a chance to speak the unspeakable, to voice the sadness that has no other release. The confessional becomes not only a cage, but, strangely, a place to unburden the heaviest truths, if only to carry them again tomorrow. Asterisk, picture yourself now in the heart of the convent during a rare break from routine, a holy day meant to lift spirits. The calendar of a medieval nun was peppered with feast days dedicated to saints, the Virgin Mary, or significant moments in the liturgical year. These were days when, in theory, the strictest austerities loosened their grip. The sisters gather in the refectory, their simple dining hall echoing with the shuffling of sandals on worn stone. The long wooden tables are laid with clay bowls, rough bread loaves, and, if the convent was blessed with good harvests or generous patrons, perhaps a bit of salted fish or a thin broth flavored with herbs from the garden. This is not the grand feasting of noble halls. There are no spits turning fat geese over roaring hearths, no overflowing goblets or sweetmeats piled high. The feast here is symbolic, a gentle lifting of daily hardship, but still plain to the tongue and stomach. You take small bites, mindful not to appear greedy. A lay sister might read aloud from the lives of the saints while you eat, reminding everyone that joy must be tempered with holy reflection. Even your taste buds must submit to discipline. Yet on these rare days, laughter sometimes bubbles up, hushed, cautious, but real. A novice might giggle at a remembered story. An older nun might slip you an extra crust of bread, a tiny kindness unnoticed by the watchful eyes of the abbess. For a few brief hours, the shadows of penance recede, and the community feels like a family again. But as the daylight fades and the bells call you back to the chapel, you know the meager warmth will not last. Tomorrow, the fast resumes, the prayers lengthen, and the feasting will feel like a dream your stomach barely remembers. Asterisk now. Drift deeper into the hush of the cloister, where every whisper could become a suspicion. The medieval world was a place where invisible boundaries marked the line between holiness and heresy, between a pious miracle and the threat of witchcraft. You sit in the dim chapter house as the abbess reads aloud a papal bull warning of heretical sex creeping into even the most devout communities. You watch the candle flame dance on the damp stone wall, and you wonder, could a careless word, a misunderstood vision, or a slip of the tongue seal your fate? Mystical visions were sometimes encouraged. Saints' lives were filled with tales of divine voices and holy ecstasies. But for an ordinary nun, claiming a vision could bring suspicion just as easily as sainthood. Was the vision from God or from the devil? Who would decide? Older sisters speak in fearful tones of inquisitors who arrive unannounced, demanding confessions. A rumor might start that someone in your convent speaks to spirits or brews forbidden potions of herbs and roots. Some of these same herbs are kept in the infirmary for healing, but intent is everything, and intent can be twisted by envy or fear. A glance at the wrong time, a hidden pouch of dried herbs found in a novice's cell, a letter to an outsider that mentions a dream. These could doom you to interrogation or worse. The air feels thick with the weight of unspoken dread. So you keep your head down. You share only what is asked. You learn that silence is safer than too many words. The fear does not come every day, but it lingers, curling like smoke around the cold stones of your bed at night. The convent's walls keep you in, but they cannot keep out the shadows of suspicion. Asterisk. Now let the hush of suspicion fade and drift instead to the relentless rumble of an empty belly, a constant companion for many nuns throughout the year. In the medieval convent, the calendar was dominated by the cycles of the church, and nowhere did this show more than in the endless pattern of fasts. Lent was the longest, but Ember Days, Rogation Days, and other holy seasons brought their own strict rules. You rise before dawn for matins, already lightheaded. A thin gruel or a crust of bread and weak ale might be all that waits for you once. The psalms are sung. Fish replaces meat, but the local rivers catch you sparse in the colder months. Salted herring and dried peas become staples. You chew the same meal day after day, your jaws aching from the effort, your stomach never truly full. In some convents, the wealthier ones, the rules are bent. Eggs sneak onto the table, cheese appears in secret. But for poorer houses, the rule of St. Benedict is strictly obeyed. Food is simple, plain, and portioned to remind you of your place in this world, humble and penitent. The hunger sharpens your prayers, the abbess says. It cleanses your spirit. But in the cloister's shadows, you see sisters falter, growing pale, and weak during the longest vigils. The infirmarian quietly brings broth to the sick, pretending it is medicine, not a meal. You close your eyes at night and dream of butter melting on warm bread, of honey on sweet cakes, of meat roasting on a spit, scents long forgotten behind these cold walls. When you wake, your mouth is dry, and the dawn bell calls you back to the unchanging rhythm of scarcity. And yet you rise, fingers cold, belly empty, voice ready to chant praise again. Asterisk, picture it now. Winter's breath slipping through ancient stones. The convent, for all its sturdy walls, is not spared the cold. You wrap your wool habit tighter around your shoulders, but the drafts seem to find every gap and seam. Your cell, the tiny room you call yours, is bare stone and as straw, mattress thin as parchment. The blanket is coarse wool, scratchy on your skin, and too thin to stop your shivers when the nights drop below freezing. You can see your own breath while you kneel for prayers in the dark chapel before dawn. The old iron brazier might flicker in the corner, but fuel is costly, and the woodpile must last until spring. You rub your hands together, lips cracked, fingertips raw. Sometimes the candles themselves freeze. Wax, so brittle it shatters when touched. The older sisters remember winters that brought frostbite and chilblains, when ink froze in the scriptorium and parchment stiffened like a board. They tell you how frost crept along the cloister arches, glittering like the edges of a saint's halo in the dim candlelight. Yet the day's tasks continue. You trudge to the garden to gather withered roots. You draw icy water from the well, your hands red and burning. When the snow comes, it piles high in the cloister walk, muffling the chants, making each footstep echo in the hush. Despite it all, you find a strange comfort in the chill. The cold purifies, the abbess reminds you. It drives out impure thoughts, sharpens the mind for prayer. And so, each night, you pull your thin blanket tighter, whisper your final song, and surrender to the numbing stillness of winter behind these holy walls. Asterisk, within these stone walls, silence is not just golden. It is demanded. Imagine yourself now, sitting in the dim chapter house, the scent of cold wax and ink lingering. A sister confesses her failings aloud, small missteps, doubts whispered. But beneath the surface, deeper secrets simmer. You learn quickly that a convent is no haven from envy or resentment. There are moments when confessions conceal more than they reveal. A novice might have feelings she dares not speak, for fear of punishment. A senior nun might hoard favors or protect her kin's wealth that paid her dowry into the convent. In the scriptorium, you overhear hushed words, accusations of stolen food, a forbidden letter hidden in a breviary. But to speak of these things aloud could bring scandal to the entire house. So secrets become prayers, buried beneath layers of ritual and ritual silence. The abbess, too, keeps her share. She negotiates rents with nearby lords, decides which priest to trust for confession, and which to turn away, quietly, so rumors do not spread of visits that last too long behind. Close doors dot in the dormitory. After Compline, you lie awake on your straw mattress, the darkness pressing close. You wonder what secrets your sisters hold, what burdens lie behind each lowered gaze. And you hold your own, buried deep in your chest, because to speak would break your vow of obedience, and perhaps your heart as well. Asterisk, picture the convent. In winter, frost creeps along the mullioned windows, your breath misting the frigid air. Illness does not respect holy vows. It moves from palate to palate, carried on a cough, a shared bowl of broth, a careless touch. Imagine yourself tending to a sick sister. Her skin is hot to the touch, yet she shivers as if buried in snow. The infirmarian, a nun trained and simple. Herbal remedies, crushes dried sage, horehound, and bitter wormwood to brew a thin, pungent tea. You help her lift the bowl to trembling lips. The smell of sweat and sickness lingers on your habit dot in the tiny infirmary. Straw mattresses lie, shoulder to shoulder. There is no privacy. The sound of labored breathing fills the air. You pray for St. Agatha's mercy, she who guards against disease. But sometimes the prayers go unanswered dot when a sister dies. Her passing is marked by slow tolling bells. And the body is wrapped in a plain woolen shroud. Her empty place at the refectory bench is a reminder. You, too, are only flesh beneath this veil. And should the abbess fall ill, it is worse still. Whispers circle the cloister. Who will lead? If she goes, who will settle disputes, speak with the bishop, safeguard the relics? The convent depends on one woman's health, fragile as a candle flame in a draft dot, so you shiver in your cell, clutch your blanket close, and pray that you might see spring come again. Here in the convent, you learn that silence is as much a part of your habit as your veil. Asterisk, imagine a chill morning when a dusty reliquary arrives at your convent gates. Word spreads. A bone fragment of St. Ursula, wrapped in silk, gifted by a local lord hoping for favor in the next life. Relics are treasure and burden both. They draw pilgrims with coins in their purses, but they also spark envy, suspicion, and the fear of theft. You stand in the chapel as the reliquary is opened. The abbess cradles the tiny yellowed bone on embroidered linen. The sisters kneel in candlelight, whispering prayers for protection, for blessings, for healing. Yet behind folded hands, some wonder, is it truly St. Ursula? Or a sliver of some forgotten soul's rib, sold by a cunning merchant? Guarding the Sia's relic becomes a daily ritual. You take your turn on watch through the night, the reliquary locked inside a wooden chest bound with iron. Every creak of the floorboards startles you awake. In your mind, you see bandits scaling the cloister wall, relic thieves who would hack open the chest for its holy prize. The relic brings visitors, and visitors bring gossip, gifts, and sometimes disease. A relic's fame can build a convent's power or split it apart when rival monasteries claim the same saint's hand, the same holy blood dot. And so you pray for St. Ursula's blessing, and that her tiny bone does not invite more trouble than grace. It's late dusk when a cloaked figure knocks at the convent's outer gate. You and another sister stand behind the wooden grill, your breath misting in the cold air. He removes his hood. A local villager, eyes red from weeping, voice hushed. He begs for confession, for guidance, for mercy. He dares not ask from the village priest. The cloister is meant to be a refuge from worldly troubles, yet the world seeps through its gates. Sinners come with secrets that cling to your mind like nettles. A stolen pig, a child born in secret, a promise broken at a graveside. You listen through the iron grate, your ear pressed to the small opening. His words tumble out in whispers, half choked with shame. The scent of mud and sweat drifts in with him, a reminder of how rough life is beyond these walls. You repeat the prayers you've learned, words like balm on a raw wound. But when you lie in your straw bed that night, the stories echo in your head. You wonder how far mercy stretches, and if you have enough faith to carry the weight of others' sins. Outside, the villagers call you holy women, intercessors, guardians of virtue. But no vow can shield your mind from the confessions left behind. At the cloister gate, imagine this next hush of daily life. You slip into the convent's scriptorium just after prime. The morning light, cold and clear, pools through the narrow arched windows. Your sandals pad across the stone floor as you join a row of other nuns, each bent over parchment like bees over wax dot. Your task today is to copy a psalter, line by line, word by word, with ink made from gallnuts and iron salts, sharp enough to stain your fingers for days. A misstroke means scraping the vellum. A mistake means penance later. You hunch forward, eyes straining over the Latin letters, your breath held steady so it won't smudge the drawing lines. The scriptorium is silent, save for the soft hiss of quills and the occasional drip of melted wax into a brass holder. Sometimes you hear a sister's stomach growl or a cough muffled in her sleeve. Through the glassless windows comes the distant sound of crows and church bells. Life beyond these walls, always close yet forever distant. The hours stretch long. Your back aches from the hard bench. The ink runs out. You rise to grind more. Pigment, your fingers blackened and your sleeves brushed with fine dust. In that labor, you see a glimmer of meaning. Words preserved for generations. Prayers to outlast your own voice. But when the bell finally tolls for terce, you blink at the sudden blur in your vision. In the scriptorium's hush, you have left part of yourself behind on that page, a sliver of your life sealed between lines of ink, forever hidden beneath the weight of holy words. When your fingers grow too stiff from script and silence. You're sent outside, not for leisure, but to tend the convent's garden. It's said that a nun's hands must always be busy, her mind always at prayer. So you kneel in the damp soil with your wool skirts tucked up and a rough apron tied over your habitat in this small walled garden. Rows of herbs grow thick and tangled, rosemary and sage for cooking, lavender and mint to soothe headaches, rue, and wormwood for remedies. You work beside your sisters, but no one talks. Instead, you listen, the rustle of your veil in the breeze, the hum of bees drifting from blossom to blossom, the scratch of your trowel against the roots. Sometimes you find more than plants. A buried bone from an old graveyard, forgotten under the turned earth. A broken shard of pottery from the time when this convent was still a nobleman's hall. You bury these things again. The relics of other lives return to the soil. The work is simple, but it's a constant lesson in humility. You weed and prune, only to watch the wild brambles creep back each spring. You taste the mint on your tongue, and wish for a sweetness you're not allowed. The air smells of damp earth and crushed leaves, a balm after hours under cold stone arches. By the time the bell rings for sext, you rise stiffly, your knees damp, your apron stained. The garden remains half order, half chaos, a quiet reflection of your own soul, always in need of tending, always half wild beneath the veil. Not all visitors come bearing good news. Imagine yourself in the convent's parlor, a small, stone chamber divided by a heavy wooden grille, thick bars carved with a simple cross pattern. This is the only place where the outside world may speak to you, and you to it. A messenger stands on the far side, cap in hand, dirt on his boots. He brings a letter from your family. Your father has died, or your sister is betrothed, or your dowry is in dispute. Perhaps it is news of war, your ancestral lands now under siege, or your brothers forced to take up arms. You press your fingers against the bars, wishing for the warmth of flesh, the press of a comforting hand. But there is only this small window, this grate that reminds you, you belong here now. Behind the grill, your life given over to silence and stone. The visitor's voice carries echoes. You strain to hear, to piece together the half-whispered details. Some nuns weep openly. Others mask their sorrow in calm detachment. For some, these visits spark envy, longing, even defiance, a reminder of a life that might have been. For others, they are an unwelcome pull back to a world they have sworn to forsake. When the visit ends, the grill is shut, the latch bolted. Your words, your secrets, your memories remain trapped on your side of the bars. You return to the chapel, your heart a little heavier than before, your prayers tinged with grief for a family now more distant than ever. Asterisk. Even behind stone walls, secrets find cracks to slip through. Imagine yourself kneeling at your little desk, a stub of quill in your fingers, candle flame dancing in the draught. You know this is forbiddance, writing letters that slip beyond. Convent gates without the abbess's blessing is strictly against the rule, but your heart is heavy, your mind restless, and you crave word from the world outside. Some nuns risk passing messages through servants, visiting priests, or even pilgrims. They press wax seals onto tiny scrolls, tuck them into hems or hidden sleeves. Words of longing, quiet rebellion, family troubles, or news of land and inheritance disputes. These tiny fragments of ink carry the weight of hope and risk. If discovered, you could be punished. Forced penance, solitary confinement, loss of privileges, extra hours of prayer. Yet the need to be heard, to remain a daughter, a sister, a woman with ties to a life beyond these cloister walls, overcomes your fear. By candlelight, you whisper your truths onto parchment. Perhaps it is a plea for mercy in a family dispute, or a secret vow to escape, or merely a confession of your weary heart. When the letter is passed, hidden in the basket of the almoner, or tucked into a visiting friar's satchel, you hold your breath. You pray that it will reach its destination, and that your words will find an echo in a world that now feels impossibly far away. Asterisk. In the silence of your cell, another battle rages, a constant, creeping discomfort that scratches at your sanity. Just as surely as your prayers try to calm it, you lie on your straw-filled mattress, blanket rough against your skin. But you do not rest alone. Tiny parasites make their home in the seams of your habit, in the folds of your veil, in the straw, beneath your body. Lice crawl at your hairline. Fleas jump between bed linens. Bedbugs creep out in the hush of the night to feed. There is no easy relief. Hot baths are rare, sometimes limited to a handful of times a year, and soap is precious. Your tonsured scalp, meant to be a symbol of humility, becomes an invitation for nits to nest. You try to comb them out with crude iron combs. You wash your shift in cold water and hang it near the hearth when allowed, hoping the heat will kill. Some of the pests dot, yet the scratching continues, a private misery shared by every sister in the dormitory. You wake to red welts on your arms, a raw patch behind your ear, a sister next to you, shifting and whispering prayers as she scratches. Her scalp dot in your prayers. You ask for relief. In your daily tasks, you carry the secret sting on your skin. And as the sun breaks through the cloister windows, you rise once more, humbled by the simplest torment, scratching at the edges of your faith. Asterisk, you might imagine that being cloistered meant long hours of serene prayer, but much of your day as a medieval nun was spent bent over endless, mundane chores that blurred together until your back ached, and your mind-numbed. Picture yourself in the convent's laundry yard. It's dawn, and you kneel by a giant wooden tub, your sleeves rolled to your elbows. Your hands are raw from scrubbing the coarse wool habits of the sisters. The cold water is thick with lye soap you made yourselves, harsh enough to sting cracked skin. When the laundry is done, there are gardens to weed, herbs to gather, firewood to chop, floors to sweep. Some sisters tend to livestock, chickens, goats, their cries echoing off the stone cloister walls. Others spin thread or mend garments by firelight until their eyes blur. You can feel how each task becomes its own quiet litany. Scrub, rinse, wring, sweep, gather, stack. If you're lucky, there might be brief moments to pause, stretch your shoulders, and breathe in the crisp air that carries the scent of fresh earth and distant bells. Yet just as quickly, you return to the cycle. Labor is holy, they tell you. Work keeps temptation at bay. But some days, you wonder if it is your spirit being cleansed or simply worn away. Asterisk, as evening deepens and the chapel bells mark the final prayers, you're not free to slip into a restful sleep. Instead, tonight, it's your turn to keep the night watch, a silent vigil that few speak of, but every nun endures. Imagine yourself wrapped in a heavy wool cloak, candle lantern in hand. You shuffle quietly along the cloister's stone corridor, your footsteps muffled by straw-strewn floors. Outside, the wind sighs through the narrow windows, carrying with it a chill that creeps under your wimple. Your task is to ensure the sacred spaces remain untouched by intruders or temptation. The relics safe, the fires tended, the doors bolted. Against the night. It sounds noble, but the reality is long hours of pacing, eyelids heavy with fatigue. Each squeak of the old beams, each creak of the gate, makes your heart pound. You stand guard in the freezing church, breath fogging in the candlelight. Shadows stretch from the altar like ink on parchment. You fight sleep with whispered prayers, clutching your rosary until the wooden beads are warm in your palm. Sometimes you hear weeping in the distance, not a ghost, but perhaps another. Sister keeping her vigil, wrestling her own burdens in the dark. Dawn feels impossibly far away, and you wonder how many nights you can stand alone, staring into the sacred gloom, while your own thoughts echo louder than the silence. Asterisk, the next day, your weary feet drag you to the chapter house. There, under the cold gaze of your prioress and sisters, you confess your faults. Every slip of the tongue, every wandering thought, every hidden resentment. Imagine the circle of nuns, their faces pale in the thin morning light filtering through. The stained glass. The air is heavy with the scent of damp stone and ink. You kneel on the hard flagstones, the chill biting through your habit. The rule is merciless. Penance is given not just for your actions, but for your thoughts. A careless daydream during prayers? A hint of pride when praised for your embroidery? You speak each failing aloud, your voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. There is no privacy in the life of a nun. Even your mind is open to judgment. Your penance might be fasting on bread and water for days, or hours spent prostrate before the altar. Worse, you might be ordered to wear a hair shirt beneath your habit, coarse goat's hair that scratches your skin raw. A constant reminder of your UNWORTHINESS as you rise and return to your place. The sting of shame lingers longer than the cold. You tell yourself that confession is a cleansing of the soul. But sometimes, as you lie awake later, the words come back like whispers. You are never pure enough. Asterisk. As the seasons turn and the monastery's rhythms lull you into a resigned routine. A new test of obedience arises, one that cuts deeper than any penance. You are ordered by your prioress to bear witness against a sister you love like family. It begins with a whisper in the cloister. A fellow nun, Sister Agnes, is accused of stealing from the convent store. A small thing, a cheese, morsel of cheese, a scrap of linen. You know the truth. You saw her slip the cloth away, desperate to bandage her feet, raw from endless hours of kneeling on bare stone. Your heart aches for her suffering. Yet, when summoned to the prioress's chamber, your duty is clear. The air is heavy with candle smoke. Your prioress's gaze pins you in place like an insect. She demands your honesty, but your loyalty to the rule is stronger than your compassion. With trembling lips, you confess what you saw. You watch the pain flicker across Sister Agnes's eyes as the punishment is handed down. Days in solitary penance, meals reduced to scraps. She will not meet your eyes again. You tell yourself this is what the rule demands. Absolute truth, absolute obedience. But the guilt clings to you like the smell of cold ash in the winter cloister. You lie awake that night, hearing the wind slip through the shutters, and wonder if obedience sometimes tastes like betrayal. The years in the convent have slipped away like pale light through stained glass. Your hands are warm, your spirit tethered tightly to the rhythms of prayer and penance. Now, as age draws near and the daily burdens grow heavier, you face the quietest passage, the final one. The infirmary is cold, a place both feared and sought. The scent of herbs mingles with the damp stone walls. Sisters tend to the sick and elderly with gentle hands, their prayers a soft backdrop to the creaking floorboards. Here, the life you once knew begins to dim. Your body aches with the weight of countless years of labor and restriction. You find comfort in small rituals, the familiar touch of rosary beads, the soft murmur of chant drifting through the cloister, the presence of sisters who share your journey's end. Death in the Asa convent is surrounded by ritual and reverence. The bells toll softly, calling the community to prayer. Your final confession is heard in hushed tones. The Mass for the dead is a solemn promise that your soul will find peace beyond the stone walls. And so you slip away gently, a life woven into the fabric of the monastery, your story one of quiet endurance, hidden sacrifice, and unyielding faith. In the stillness, the centuries whisper on, a testament to the strength and sorrow of those who chose, or were chosen, to walk this path. As we draw this journey through the cloistered halls and quiet corners of medieval nunneries to a close, take a moment to breathe deeply. Imagine the soft glow of candlelight flickering against ancient stone walls, the gentle rustle of pages turning in a worn prayer book, and the distant echo of chant lingering in the cool air. The life of a medieval nun was marked by hardship, discipline, and sacrifice, but also by moments of profound peace, community, and faith. Their stories remind us of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of constraint and challenge, and the ways in which even the most hidden lives weave into the tapestry of history. Now, as you rest in your own space, wrapped in comfort and quiet, let these reflections soothe your mind. Feel the rhythm of those long ago days, slow your breath, ease your thoughts, and guide you gently into the calm embrace of sleep. Thank you for sharing this hushed journey through time. Wherever you are and whenever you listen, may peace find you, and may your dreams be soft and kind. Good night.